All right, no music. It's because everything's thrown off. Everything's a little weird tonight because you're like, wait, I could have sworn it was Wednesday, but man, we're a day closer to the weekend. You're not. Unfortunately, you're not a day closer to the weekend. I'm just a day closer to you. I am your host, Garret Price. This is the Dynasty Nerds podcast on the Better Sports Network. And normally you got to wait. You know, we like to delay pleasure, and you got to wait for Dennis Bennett at the end. But
We're
today,
edgy like that.
we've got him the whole time tonight because we're going to be covering everything you need to know for those last minute drafts right before the season starts. So at Culture Coach, the man himself, Dennis Bennett, is here. Dennis, how you doing, buddy?
Dude, I am so psyched for football. I've
So
been,
close.
I'm supposed to be working and I'm like checking my phone, say who's getting signed. Dwayne McBride got cut. We're like, oh, but he's got so much contact balance. Oh, Kevin O'Connell knocked him on his ass there. It's like, and then they signed Myles Gaskin. Like, now don't get me wrong, I liked Myles Gaskin coming out, but that was what, 4 years ago, 3 years ago. He didn't produce.
And they have a similar guy in Kene, however you pronounce his last name.
Kene Nwangwu.
Yeah. Who knows? But Sedated Forks here. He got the memo about the switch day. That's right. Wednesday night is the new thing, which honestly, Dennis, I'm kind of excited about. Part of the reason we decided to move to Wednesday night as opposed to Thursday night is next week, next Thursday, is the first game. And look, me being a company man, I have always done my best to promote how cool it is that we get to be on at the same time as the games, talking it, breaking it down. But after talking with the higher ups, those that are much smarter than I am, they're like, your show is great. Well, they didn't say it quite like that, but I'm going to say that. Your show's great. We want to make sure that the advice and things that you give in the show are actually able to be implemented. But if you're doing it on the day of the first game, they don't have time to do it because things have already started. So we are now going to be a day earlier. So that way we make sure everything's ready to go for your games. Dennis, are you excited about being on Wednesday nights and actually getting to watch Thursday Night Football now?
I am, because here's I don't know if you're watching on video. Here's what it looked like last year. Just look at me.
Yep.
Because my TV's up here. I'm trying to concentrate. Can't have the volume up.
Exact same way for me. I have it on the iPad over here, and I'm constantly, and now I just get to talk to the people. I don't have to be distracted. We get to game plan. We get to scheme for all of our fantasy football leagues ahead of time. So this is going to be the new night for the Dynasty Nerd Show on the Better Sports Network. So I'm super excited. Hopefully you guys are excited as well. So Dennis, lots of things to cover today. Lots of stuff that we want to get to. It is going to be a jam-packed show. Even though we don't have people coming in and out and on and off like we normally do, it's because we have so much to talk about.
I can do this.
And welcome back, Dennis Bennett. Please randomly just do that throughout the show, and I'll just introduce you every time you do it.
Right on.
All right. Well, let's get into the news that everyone has been talking about since 4 p.m. yesterday, and that is the Jonathan Taylor situation. So let's talk about it in a nutshell, but let's also talk about how that affects fantasy football, what you should do in Dynasty League specifically, but we can also touch on the redraft stuff as well. But Dennis, as everyone already knows, but we're going to fill him in anyway, Jonathan Taylor did not get traded at the 4 p.m. deadline. Instead, we thought that it would just be okay. Well, now he's just going to be the running back for the Colts like we always thought he was going to be. Not so fast. He is still on the pup, so he's going to be missing at least, and I want to emphasize that, at least the first 4 games. There's a chance it could be longer depending on how this whole squabble works out and plays out. So, Dennis, what do we do as fantasy football managers and Dynasty fantasy football members?
So the first question you got to ask yourself in Dynasty is, do I believe in Jonathan Taylor's talent? Because if you do and you roster him, then you're coping. Now, the only thing that makes me nervous is they put him on. So he was out of camp because he was doing his quote unquote own rehab on his ankle. And then he never got into camp and started working. And then he goes through this whole pay me, trade me, and now he's on PUP. And so now the question my biggest question is his ankle really in a lot worse shape than we've been led to believe? Is that the issue? Because I could see if he, he hasn't practiced and the Dolphins were such a good fit and they're like, we just don't know how healthy he is. We can't bring him in, so we're not going to overpay for him. But from Dynasty, I believe in the talent. So I'm going to start poking around on rosters where I don't have him, especially if I'm like a year out. Is he going to be in Indy next year? I don't know, but I believe in the talent. Running back is the easiest position to transfer from college to the NFL. We see it all the time. So if he goes to a new team, I'm going to expect he fits into that offense as a premier piece. So I'm going to kind of start to fish a little bit and see what kind of discount I can get. If somebody's on the verge of competing and they're like, and I can give them a couple players that will help them compete and I get Taylor back, even if he sits out until week 9, because first he's on the PUP, then he's pouting. Now he's got to get back in time for his contract to toll so it doesn't toll. I want to do that. Now, if I have him, I probably don't want to trade him unless my team is a hot mess. And I'm not going to sell him at a discount. We're veteran players here. We're feeding on, other people's panic right now.
Sure.
So if you're listening and you're feeling panicked, look, just relax. Take a chill pill, calm down. Don't take a lowball deal. Get you something good if you need it. If you're like, my team's ready to compete, but without Taylor, my running back room is a hot mess. Well, then don't take a talent that's, 2 tiers down from Taylor to replace him. You want to get something of equal value.
Yeah, and you might have to take somebody that's a little bit older or something like that to make it work. But let's talk specifics though, because in a vacuum, I think a lot of people are probably with you. But when it gets down to the nitty gritty, what kind of price tag are you willing to either A, buy him for, or B, sell him for? So I actually just got done with the Dynasty Nerds podcast. Originally, it was supposed to be the one coming out from the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Some technical issues. Fortunately, that one won't be coming out, but we did bring Chris Meeker back on, and we talked about our top 12s, but we also discussed the Jonathan Taylor situation, which originally we had him in our top 12, and obviously now we do not have him in our top 12 for redraft. And we talked about where you felt comfortable buying him and selling him. And basically where I came out on this was, if you think that you can get a 24 first that is in a super flex league inside the top 3, then I'm willing to sell Jonathan Taylor. Because in a startup right now, I would probably take Caleb Williams, Marvin Harrison Jr., and Drake May ahead of him. So I would be willing to do that. Now, if it is a late 24 first, I'm willing to buy Jonathan Taylor for a late 24 first. So the midpoint is where it gets murky, but I'm willing to sell him for an early first, buy him for a late first. Dennis, are you on a similar thought pattern? Or
very, very much? If I can, the hard part is it's so easy to say, oh, it's going to be an early first.
Right.
And we just don't know. So
you
gotta
know.
Have a lot of faith. I mean, because even if the team finished last in 2022 and you're like, oh, and they didn't get better, a team can stumble into, fourth from last. And now you got the 104. Now, that being said, there's some other talent coming out in this draft. We do expect it, but those 3 players, May, Harrison, and Williams, look to be like the cream of the crop this year.
Yeah. All right.
So players are going to join them, but I wouldn't take Brock Bowers straight up for Jonathan Taylor at this point.
No.
And he seems to be the 104.
Sure.
But man, if I could get like if I could, Damian Pierce, who's I think projected to be somewhere between like RB12 and RB18, I think this year, and a late first, I would
Yeah, I
ride
would do
that.
that.
Yeah, and because like I still don't believe in Pierce long term. I think Taylor will have a more productive career starting next year going forward than Pierce and a longer career. But if I need a running back this year that I think is going to give me high RB2 numbers and I can grab a first round pick from it so I can still compete and build, that makes sense to me as much as I love Jonathan Taylor's talent. For me, the question really is like, how much are you going to give to grab one of his handcuffs? Because I think while he's out, Moss and Jackson are going to split that. What's that split look like?
Well, the first few weeks, Moss is actually looking like he's going to be out the first few weeks due to injury. So it'll probably be Jackson and Evan Hall, which I've seen a lot of Evan Hall love on Twitter. And watching his rookie tape, and this was Stephen F's question, saying, which running back's the one to grab? I think it depends on where you're at, but ultimately, I don't know that any of them are crazy valuable. I would personally lean Jackson because one, he's not the one that's hurt, but also passing work is valuable. Now, we're not going to get the same amount of checkdowns from Anthony Richardson that we did from Matt Ryan or whoever else was filling in. So that's the only part that's tricky. I don't know that I trust any of them at this point. So for me, I'm not really looking to grab one of those guys. I mean, if I have one or I can get one for free off the waiver, sure. But I'm not putting any faith in any running back on the Colts team. I would much rather go out to a different owner and make a trade for somebody to try to fill in for Jonathan Taylor as opposed to looking at his potential handcuffs.
Yeah, they're definitely low-end guys. Now, we saw last year, I think Taylor missed a game. Moss had 25 carries, but you said he's banged up now. It's Jackson popped a little bit. They're low budget guys, and you could probably I don't know that you would have to pay more than a third round pick for either one, or that you should. I think if I roster them and somebody's trying to get them, I'm going to try to strong arm them into a higher pick, obviously. But they're definitely low end solutions.
So this is an interesting one here. Bunzera, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, he says, "Hey guys, need help with the Jonathan Taylor trade. My team can make the playoffs, but I don't think I can win it all. So I could grab JT for Najee Harris plus Jerry Jeudy. If I do that, I would need to tank as both of those guys are currently starters. So would we want to tank and get JT for 2024 because he does have 3-24 first next year?" This is tough because I overall like the Najee and Jeudy side a little bit better. But if you have 3 firsts, including your own, and you don't think that you can win it all this year, I'm leaning into that tank because I want at least one of those picks to be in the top 3. So I'm fine with making that trade and then low-key hoping that Jonathan Taylor is on the pup all year and I can just store him and wait for 2024. But I'm not even opposed to doing that and then also then flipping Jonathan Taylor. What are your thoughts on that, Dennis?
Yeah, that's, it goes against my nature if I'm a playoff team to go into tank mode. So I struggle with that. So then my question, without seeing the rest of his team, is: are you really a playoff team? Or do you think that by hook or by crook and luck you get the 6th slot? If that's the case, then by all means tank it. But I feel like Najee and Jeudy are to me that's a real good value. I'm a big fan of Najee this year. I've liked him. He's a volume guy. it kind of gets under my skin a little bit when people are like, oh, they're just a volume guy. I'm like, no shit. I want my guys to get volume. That's why I like them. And while Judy's injured, there's some concern about the hamstring. When they come back, are they really over it? Is it going to flare up? So that does give me a little bit of pause there. If I'm going to get Taylor, I maybe kind of like your idea. If I'm going into tank mode, am I really going to be able to turn it around next year with the 3 picks? Because, rookies don't always pan out as quick as we would like. And depending on where they are, it may take them a year. So for me, it feels like make the trade and get Taylor and try to get a sweetener with it because he's out. See if you can get a 3rd round pick or something thrown in. But then when he comes back, if he looks okay, I agree with you. Go ahead and move him then for, a first plus, 2 firsts. If he looks like he's fine, go ahead and get more capital there, because if you're rebuilding, you're probably, you could turn it around in 24, but you're probably targeting more for 25.
And Jason Brummer just said this, and I don't disagree, but I think you got to decide which way you're going to go. He said you could also use those 3 picks to make a better playoff team. And I have no issue with that if you think those 3 picks will give you enough to put you over the top. But I'm not giving my firsts up unless I truly think that what I can get with those first will put me as the championship team, not just a contender. That puts me as the best team in the league. Because ultimately guys like Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison Jr. will eventually make you the best team in the league. So you kind of have to evaluate your team from that perspective. Real quick thing I want to touch on, because I know not everyone in here is a big college football fan, and not everyone is living in the wonderful city of Columbus, Ohio, but this is an Ohio State Buckeye leaf. This is part of the stickers. Right. It's the stickers that they put on the Ohio State helmet. So it is not a weed leaf, as many people keep asking me, why are you wearing a weed hat, Garrett? That seems a little out of character for you. It is not a weed hat. It is a Ohio State Buckeye leaf. So just clarification piece. Matt, better boss, if you're emailing me right now asking why I'm wearing a weed leaf on the show, it is not. It's an Ohio State Buckeye leaf. All right. So we clarified that. Last thing that we'll touch on, Heavy T just told me to get off the weed, as in like what Stephen A. Smith said. All right. Sedated Fork said, where would you be willing to draft JT and redraft? Is he off your board? So I actually just updated the contender values on the Dynasty GM yesterday, right after this news happened, and he dropped into redraft range right around the Isaiah Pacheco, DeAndre Swift range. So that's where he dropped, right around player 90 overall. So pretty precipitous drop for him. But if he does come back specifically to the Colts, they're going to run him into the ground, because I don't think they plan on having him back next year. So they're just going to run him into the ground, give him tons of work, and because they don't care about the tread on the tires at that point. All right. Andrew says, Quentin Johnston for Gabe Davis and Renfro. I'm a contender that could use a little bit of depth. I personally think you could get more for Quentin Johnston than those guys, but I am not a big Gabe Davis fan personally, because I never know which weeks to start him, and I always pick the wrong ones. Dennis, your thoughts?
I love Gabe Davis this year. I think he's going to be more consistent this year than he has been any year of his career.
Even with Kincaid there now?
Yeah, even with Kincaid there.
Ooh,
I'm not drinking the Kincaid Kool-Aid. I am not on it.
I just don't see how he gets more volume this year consistently than he got last year with a first-round tight end added.
It's just another tight end, and he's gonna be splitting time with Dawson Knox and a litany of other wide receivers. Gabe Davis is the number 2 receiver in Buffalo. He just is. I get it. Oh, we haven't seen a tight end with this like this since Kelsey came in. Yada yada yada. Give it a couple years. This ain't the year. This is Gabe Davis's year.
Gabe Davis has had a couple years, and we still only get 6 touchdowns a year, and 3 of those come in one game every year.
I'm telling you.
So you would do it. So you would take Gabe Davis and Renfrow.
I probably wouldn't.
You fought with me for no reason, Dennis.
Well, no, there was a reason. I would want somebody other than Renfrow. I'm not into Renfrow. I think that there was a time and a place for him, but I don't know. I'm not on board with the Josh McDaniel is going to make him the next Wes Welker. They've got Devontae Adams, who's going to get 200 targets. Jacoby Myers is going to get some. Josh Jacobs is going to get 300 carries. I don't think Renfrow gives you the depth, and Johnston is the wide receiver 4. So in Dynasty for me, he's a hold. He's behind Palmer right now. He's listed as the direct backup to Mike Williams. Now, if Williams gets hurt, yeah, he'll have some viability. But they held Palmer out in training camp. When they sat the starters, Johnston was playing and Palmer wasn't. So they like what Josh Palmer brings to the table. I think Johnston's going to be real good, but I'd rather get more than I'd rather get Gabe Davis and a pick rather than Gabe Davis and Wes Welker, or not Welker, Hunter Renfrow.
Basically the same guy. Just one doesn't have Tom Brady thrown to him. Mike Manning asks, what needs to be added to DK Metcalf for you to send away Higgins? Pick Dobbins or Juju is my best options. Well, definitely not J.K. Dobbins. I think he's going to have a monster year this year, so definitely not Dobbins. Pick, I'd be curious as to what the pick was. If it's a second, sure. Juju's probably my favorite because if it's a 10-team league, you're probably not starting Juju very often if you're a contender. But all that being said, I don't know. Like, if I'm upgrading from Metcalf to Higgins, I don't feel like that's a huge upgrade. Like, if I'm trading away DK Metcalf to get better at wide receiver, I'm targeting someone that I think is going to be a little bit higher as far as volume and potential output goes. So, like, the redraft rankings this year overall, we have, let me make sure I got it here. At wide receiver, T. Higgins is looked at as wide receiver 14, and DK Metcalf is wide receiver 15. Oh, you're receiving Higgins. Wait, you're giving Higgins and you're receiving Metcalf. Oh, that changes the game. If you can get Dobbins and Metcalf for T. Higgins, woo, all day.
Hit accept before he sobers up.
Yeah, if I can get Metcalf and Dobbins, whew, done and done. All right, one last question, and then we'll get to our next couple things that we want to talk about. We've got some bold predictions that we're going to be talking about. We've got some award predictions. We're busting out the Rich Dotson crystal balls today. So we're looking forward into the future this year. Steve F asks, I have to place 2 players on my taxi squad that are rookies or 1-year guys. Who would you pick from Purdy, JSN, Addison, Laporta, and A-Chain? Part of this would be probably what the rest of my team looks like. Do I need to use any of these guys this year? Or are they just going to more or less sit anyway? Because I think the most likely players you're going to use, if it's a super flex, it's probably Purdy, JSN, and Addison. I would guess Laporta and A-Chain would be the ones that would sit most likely. But I don't know. What do you think, Dennis?
Yeah, I'm definitely taxiing A-Chain. But then again, I'm not as high on him as the rest of the nerds. I think Addison and JSN, I think Addison has the better year this year. He's the wide receiver 2 on a team that passes more versus JSN, a wide receiver 3 on a team that passes less. If it's super flex, you're probably going to need Purdy. Well, let's see, doesn't say if it's a 10 or a 12 team. I'm guessing 12. So Purdy is probably at least your quarterback 3. So you're going to want to keep him around. And then I'm going to go A-Chain and Laporta just because I think that as much potential as Laporta is showing, I still think you want to give a tight end time to develop. And if he does develop, it shows consistency this year, then you can always bring him up later in the season and cut somebody else. But I feel like Purdy, JSN, and Addison are going to be the three most productive players on this list.
Yeah, we agree on that. He did say it's a super flex tight end premium. So if for some reason you don't have depth at tight end, you did say it's a championship team. If you don't have a ton of depth, then I would flip Addison and Sam Laporta. Matt Laporta was like a big name prospect that the Cleveland Indians traded. It was either CC Sabathia or Bartolo Colon. He was like the big name prospect in one of those trades. And the dude could just never hit a curveball. But every time I say Sam Laporta, I'm always thinking of Matt Laporta. But yeah, if you think you need a little more depth at tight end, then it would be Laporta over Addison. But definitely A-Chain would be the one on the bench for me. All right. Let's get to this one. Oh, Sedated Fork says the Buckeye edibles, though. Rich Dotson would appreciate that comment for sure. JJ says tight end premium. What side? London and B Jordan. So I'm guessing Brevin Jordan. I can't think of any other B.
Yeah,
Jordans.
that's who I would guess.
Okay.
So London or Kincaid and Pittman.
Yeah, I think that's easily Kincaid and Pittman. I don't think that's very close. What do you think?
I think London is going to have a really good year. Brevin Jordan is going to be insignificant. But in Dynasty, I'm going to want Kincaid and Pittman. I think Pittman will continue to grow with Anthony Richardson. Kincaid is going to be serviceable.
You hate him so much. You hate him so much. It is a tight end premium too, so that only makes Kincaid that much more valuable. All right, Dennis. Well, let's get to you know what? This is a good stopping point. Why don't we take our first break now, and when we come back, we will talk about our NFL award predictions for 2023. So stay tuned. We will be back in a moment.
So let's get into some best ball philosophy here.
Yeah.
In your experience, going back many, many, many years, drafting in national tournaments, Bradley, have you historically been shying away from the running back position in favor of wide receivers, in favor of, if you're drafting in the FFPC tight end premium format, in favor of tight ends as well? Is that the smart play when you're drafting this early in the drafting season?
Yeah, so taking value is going to be huge, and looking at like running backs and wide receivers, like you want to take a look at how the structure is. So you mentioned earlier the FFPC has a couple different types, like they've got super flex and one quarterback, and so that's going to change your strategy a little bit if you have only two wide receivers or if you're drafting three wide receivers. And of course the PPR is a different aspect compared to other formats or other tournaments, and so keeping in mind the pass catching upside of some of the running backs may be more valuable in those formats. So the Austin Eckler's, the Christian McCaffreys may be more value because they get more receptions, and so like I loved taking late shots a couple of years ago on like the JD McKissicks of the world, who would get 50 receptions really cheaply. So that's something to consider. But when it comes to like overall value, like you're in the middle of a draft, and you just noticed that, I don't know, maybe it's Chris Godwin has fallen 14 spots, but Chris Godwin was not in your plans to be drafting. Like maybe you don't have a strong player take on Chris Godwin, or my take is that I don't think the Bucs are going to be particularly good this year. But for him to be dropping, let's say 14 spots, is more than a full round. And based on the data that we've seen, if you get to draft a player more than 12 spots ahead or behind ADP, so they drop 12 or more spots, you have an 84% edge over the rest of the tournament players who are drafting this player, because typically this player isn't going to drop. The average draft position is a really strong indicator of where a player is going to go. And I think that is also on the flip side. If you are reaching too much, you're giving up value in your drafts. And so when it comes to value-based drafting, you need to consider, just because this guy isn't my plans or I don't have a strong player take on him, maybe that's your opportunity to sprinkle in some shares of this player at a good price.
Welcome back in the Dynasty Nerds on a Wednesday, not a Thursday, on a Wednesday. I almost wanted to say on a Tuesday. Club going up. No. But we are back. We're going to be talking about some NFL award predictions. Now, this is a slight detour from fantasy football stuff, but it does have tie-in. Obviously, the players that perform at MVP levels or, things like that, they usually do pretty well for fantasy football as well. So, Dennis, we're going to focus on the major awards. Let's start with the offensive rookie of the year. Who do you think is going to be the offensive rookie of the year in 2023?
I mean, it's so hard to not pick Bijan Robinson. I struggled when you said, hey, let's do this. I thought, well, it's Bijan. And then it's like picking anybody else is like, oh, you're Mr. Hot Take. I'm like, granted, this was all going on in my head. But I just feel like he's in a situation where he's going to get the volume needed. And he's talented to a point that it will take an otherworldly performance by somebody else. I don't think any of the wide receivers are going to get the passing volume.
Nope.
Anthony Richardson would have to defy all odds and be so much better of a passer than we've seen him be in his 12 college games and in preseason. Is Richardson going to rush for 1,000 yards? Probably. But I think it's going to be Bijan. I think he's going to easily surpass 1,000 yards on the ground. And from the way things look, he's probably going to catch 50 to 60 passes. Najee caught 70 as a rookie. So it wouldn't surprise me one bit if he has a better rookie year than Najee Harris had. More efficient. He's just a more skilled runner than Najee. Now he doesn't have, he's about 15 pounds lighter than Najee, but he's more agile. I struggle to think, I watched CJ Stroud and Bryce Young in preseason. I think they're going to be okay quarterbacks. They're not, I don't think either one of them are put the team on my back and carry them to wins. I think Richardson has that ability. He just doesn't have the experience. And so I'm going to go chalk and go with Bijan Robinson.
I'm with you. I think that's the chalk answer, and it's probably the right answer. But the thing I keep coming back to is the NFL loves to give awards to quarterbacks. They really do. I think back to Justin Jefferson's borderline historic rookie season, like just an amazing year. And they gave it to Justin Herbert. And Justin Herbert had a good rookie year too, but not to the same level that Justin Jefferson had compared to his peers. And they still gave it to Justin Herbert over him. So that's the one thing that keeps sticking in my brain is like, if Anthony Richardson has a good season and Bijan Robinson has a great season, would they still consider taking Richardson because of how valuable the award choosers, like how they value the quarterback?
I mean, I could see there being burnout because we've been talking about Bijan for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so I could see them going, well, we've known how good he is since, 2021. Of course, that's what he did. But look at this guy with 12 college starts and look at what he did. He got the Colts to 6 wins. I could see that, but man, if if Richardson passes for 2,500 yards and rushes for 1,000, and Bijan catches 70 passes and rushes for 1,400 yards, they got to give it to Bijan.
Yeah, I think that is my selection as well, but it is stuck in my head that is how that vote typically goes. Dennis, with this being a fantasy football podcast, we don't really cover IDP a lot, but it's probably still worth it to talk about. Do you have a pick for defensive rookie of the year?
Defensive rookie of the year, to me, so I'm kind of reminded a little bit of like baseball awards where, winning a gold glove doesn't mean you have the best fielding percentage.
Right.
You've got to make the splash plays. And it feels like Jack Campbell of Detroit, who's going to step into what should be a very productive linebacker role.
Right.
Should be the guy. But then, we had Sauce Gardner won it last year, I think.
Yep.
There are a couple cornerbacks from this class that were pretty highly regarded. Will Anderson. If Anderson puts up double-digit sacks, if he gets 12 sacks, if he gets 40 tackles and 12 sacks, I think Anderson's going to be in the running for it. I think that Campbell is going to have to put up like 140 tackle season, and the Lions defense take a huge step. But, as a linebacker, you just don't always make those splash plays that get headlines. And so you can get lost in there. Looking back at like the defensive player of the year winners, it's Nick Bosa, it's TJ Watt, Aaron Donald, Stephon Gilmore, Aaron Donald, Khalil Mack. It's like anybody that's a linebacker is really a defensive end. They're an edge rusher. You go all the way back to, 13 before you get to Luke Kuechly. So that being said, I'm going with the guy that Houston made the stunning trade to move back up to pick number 3 and get Will Anderson.
Yeah. I think that's another one that's it. Right now, it's the best betting odds is Will Anderson as the rookie of the year. I want to go with Jalen Carter. I just know how much they rotate that Eagles defensive line. So I just don't know if the raw numbers are going to be there for him, even though I think he's a freak of nature. But I'm going to go off the board a little bit. All right. I went pretty chalk with Bijan, but I'm going off the board here. I'm going to go with Will McDonald from the Jets. The defensive line for the Jets is really freaking good. They are not going to have the luxury, the opposing offensive linemen. They are not going to have the luxury of being able to double team a good young edge rusher because there's so much interior penetration that's going to be happening that you're going to lose track of a guy like Will McDonald. And I think he's got the length and the explosiveness to get to the quarterback. And I think he's a guy that could sneak into that double-digit sack range. And if you get in the double digits in sacks, you have a real shot to win Rookie of the Year. So I'm going to go Defensive Rookie of the Year, a little bit off the board, but I am going to go Will McDonald of the Jets. All right, Monday Night Rants, my guy Edward Rouse is saying, it's Wednesday, not Thursday. Dennis is already on, and Garrett is wearing a questionable hat. I am so confused right now, but I'm glad I am here. For what it's worth, this is an Ohio State Buckeye hat, not a weed hat. I know there's a lot of confusion, but it's an Ohio State Buckeye hat.
We're glad you're here too, Edward. My concerns about McDonald is that line is really, really good before he got there. Will he get enough playing time to make it? That's the biggest concern I have with McDonald.
Sure. That's kind of where I'm at with Jalen Carter is just how much they rotate, how good they have, how many good pieces they have there. I get that as well. All right, let's move on to Coach of the Year. Let's start with the AFC. Dennis, I know this one's a little tough because we don't evaluate coaches, but more or less it's a guy that helps his team overperform, more or less. Is there a guy that you have in mind for the AFC?
And the AFC is the tougher of the two divisions. And it's like, when you started talking about coach of the year, I'm like, oh, it's going to be Andy Reid because the Chiefs are going to go back to the Super Bowl. And then you said the coach that helps his team overperform. And when you say it like that, then I'm like, oh, that sounds like Mike Vrabel.
Yeah.
They're going to, Henry's back and he's healthy. Tannehill is healthy. I think Tannehill is going to have a surprisingly good year. They added DeAndre Hopkins. The defense is still pretty good. And they're a team that they're like, we're perfectly happy to win by 2.
Hold on, Dennis. Better bosses here. I got to clarify. Buckeye leaf. This is Ohio State Buckeye leaf. It's not weed. Don't kick me off the air. All right, go ahead, Dennis.
And so for me, Vrabel just puts that team in position to eke out wins. And so if I'm looking at it from who's going to help them overperform, I kind of think, well, maybe the Titans. Another guy that could help them overperform because they've been down since they won the Super Bowl with Joe Flacco. Bringing in Todd Monken, changing how that offense runs. They had a pretty crappy defense last year. They've added some pieces to it. But if Lamar is able to really assimilate the new offense, we've seen him have a super efficient passing season. If they were to all of a sudden, put that team on his shoulders and Harbaugh not make any stupid mistakes, I could see it going to Harbaugh. But in the end, I think I'm going to stick with Andy Reid. I mean, so often we see guys who do a great job year after year after year get taken for granted. And if the Chiefs go back to back and win their 3rd or 4th Super Bowl in the last, 5-6 years, however many, I think you got to give that man his credit. And I think they're going back. I think they're on the precipice of winning another one. I'm going to go with Andy Reid.
Dennis, you should put that ticket in because right now Andy Reid is plus 5,000, the longest odds of any quarterback, tied with Todd Bowles to win Rookie of the Year or Rookie of the Year. I don't think he's going to be a rookie, Coach of the Year. So that's and you know what? I was mistaken. I said AFC. It looks like Coach of the Year. They just have one. I didn't realize that they only do one for Coach of the Year. So would it change it if you get some NFC teams involved there?
I felt like the Giants were a year early last year.
Sure.
I thought this would be their year. And since they overperformed last year, I feel like they're going to stumble a little bit this year. If somehow Jordan Love lifts the Packers, LaFleur could be in contention. But ultimately, if it's not, I'm going to stick with Reid.
All right. I'm going to go with, all of the odds are pretty long shot odds for all of these teams, but I'm going to go with Mike McDaniel, coach of the I almost said the Dallas Dolphins, the Miami Dolphins. I'm going with him. And part of the reason is I think this is the year that they could potentially put themselves at the top of the division. Now, I know it's going to be tough. Robert Saleh and those Jets are looking pretty good with Aaron Rodgers. We also have the Buffalo Bills. But Robert Saleh, better boss said, I think that's a good one as well. If either one of those guys, Robert Saleh or Mike McDaniel, if either one of them beat out the Bills, I think that's who wins Coach of the Year. If one of those two guys wins the division this year. All right, let's go to I think comeback player of the year. Jason Brummer also said comeback player of the year, DeMar Hamlin. I think that's a layup. Like he's going to win it. Like I don't see any way anybody else wins comeback player of the year, right?
The only one I think you'd consider might be Cooper Kupp.
Maybe Javonte.
But the feel-good story, of DeMar Hamlin. If he stays healthy all season and plays in every game, I think that he'll be the guy. You gotta, the script writers have got that one taken care of.
Yeah. So let's not spend too much time on that one. Let's get to MVP, the most exciting award. Dennis, who do you have as your 2023 NFL MVP?
So we've watched this evolve into a quarterback award,
unfortunately,
and so it's difficult to go off the position when you look at Mahomes, Rodgers, Jackson, Mahomes, Brady, Ryan, Newton, Rodgers, Manning. Oh, hey, 2012, Adrian Peterson, Rodgers, Brady, Manning, Brady. Oh, 06, LaDainian. So it's a quarterback award. I think it will continue to be a quarterback award. For me, I think it's Mahomes because I'm picking Reed as coach and them to go back and win the Super Bowl again. Like I'm a Lions fan. I adopted the Browns when I moved to Ohio. I want to see my teams do well. But I like watching dynasties, and Kansas City is a dynasty right now.
Yeah.
When Tyreek Hill was shipped out of Kansas City, and it was like, oh, well, what are they going to do? They don't have any wide receivers. And then they had like 4 wide receivers catch 500 or 600 yards. I think Sky Moore has 1,000 yards this year. I think he's going to be their number one. But they still have Travis Kelce. They've got a super efficient running game and passing game. That offense just clicks. Patrick Mahomes, he's just different. Like my son likes to tell me he's built different. And I'm like, yeah, you're soft. That's how different you are. But Mahomes is he's literally built different. Watching him come back from that high ankle sprain and just shake it off, like, no, I'm good, and hobble around. It was crazy. And that team believes in him to such a level, and they believe in what they're doing and what Andy Reid has put together, what their mission is currently unlike anything in any sport. And, anything else, if I was to pick any other player for this award, it would be solely to just not like, it's literally Mahomes or the field is how I view it.
No, I'm in a pretty similar boat. I definitely think Mahomes is the favorite and will probably be deserving. But if I was to go place like a little bit of a dark horse one, I'm going to stick with the theme that I've created here with the Miami Dolphins. I'm going to go Tua. I think Tua is a guy that if this team can stay healthy, he has 2 elite wide receivers and Jalen Waddle and in Tyreek Hill. He could put up some absolutely absurd numbers this season. And remember, this is a regular season award. It is not supposed to be based on the playoffs. So if it's a regular season award and Tua puts up huge numbers and makes the playoffs, pretty sweet. Right now on FanDuel, Tua is at plus 1,600. On DraftKings, plus 2,200. So I could make some do-re-mi if I put a little money down there on Tua for MVP, and he ends up figuring out how to win it this year.
Well, what's crazy is the narrative around Tua is, oh, well, he just throws short passes and the receivers do the work. Hit the second highest ADOT of any quarterback with over 250 attempts. Let's see. No, that was dropbacks. I figured it. Any quarterback with, what did I put in for minimum? 250 dropbacks. So that was a pretty broad spectrum of quarterbacks. The second highest ADOT.
And on top of that, he was the most accurate on deep passes out of any quarterback in the NFL.
And
So
his he was eighth in deep throw percentage of attempts. 13.8% were deep throws. So I mean, he gets a bad rap, but he does go downfield.
he does. He absolutely does. So
Super
he's
sneaky there, Garrett.
yeah, I'm gonna on our break here, I'm gonna place a Tua bet. All right. Now the last award we'll get to, probably the most significant for fantasy football, Offensive Player of the Year. Now, since this has become a quarterback award for MVP, we've seen it really become a position player award for wide receivers, running backs. Who do you expect to be the Offensive Player of the Year this year, Dennis?
So the Offensive Player of the Year, it's like, who's gonna is there? I think I might ride your coattails, and I'm gonna go with Tyreek Hill.
Nice.
He had 1,700 yards last year. He's just an exceptional talent. He's little but not small. He's super fast. Very, very. He's a precise route runner. And if I'm gonna buy your argument for Tua as the MVP, then I'm gonna buy in on Tyreek as the Offensive Player of the Year.
Yeah, I could absolutely see that happening. I think there's a lot of good candidates. Justin Jefferson could obviously repeat. Jamar Chase is up there as an option. CMC, total stud. But I'm going to go with the hometown boy, Nick Chubb, as
Dude,
offensive.
I was so close to going Chubb.
Yep. I think this year they're just going to run him into the ground, but they're also going to open it up a little bit more. He's going to have the opportunity to catch more passes than he has ever caught before. So with Kareem Hunt being gone and how much they're going to be playing from shotgun, he's going to have smaller boxes. Like, it's going to be a great opportunity for him this year. So I'm going with Mr. Nicholas Chubb as the Offensive Player of the Year.
Yeah, I mean, his reception, his high end receptions was his second year with 36. And so it's not like he has to get a huge number of receptions to take that jump. But 302 attempts last year was his high. So if he gets 340 attempts and catches 55 passes,
monster season. Monster. Even if he just repeats the number of rushing attempts, but
1,500 yards and 12 touchdowns on 302.
Yeah, even if he just repeats that, but we see a boost in the receiving game by 20 receptions, 30 receptions, and he does a little bit with that, scary numbers that he could be putting up. All right, Dennis, let's touch on the Defensive Player of the Year. I know we don't do, IDP on the show very much. You do play in a couple IDP leagues though, right?
I do.
Okay. Who do you have as the Defensive Player of the Year?
Defensive Player of the Year is challenging because it's usually based on somebody that, they get a lot of sacks or they get a lot of interceptions.
Right.
They cause a lot. It seems like it's a splash play award, and looking at the good defenses, if a defense is playing well and playing together, it's awful hard to single one guy out because they're such a good unit. And, the guy I like is Roquan Smith of the Ravens, but linebackers just don't win it because they're not making those. They're not causing interceptions. They're not making a ton of sacks. They're just making tackles and doing everything right. Another guy, like Max Crosby is a guy.
That was my pick.
But so the Raiders are going to be bad and lose
Right.
a lot of games. So can you really give a guy on a terrible defense the Defensive Player of the Year award? And so I really struggle with that. So I don't expect Aaron Donald to get it this year. The Rams defense is going to be bad. Nick Bosa, he's holding out. He wants a new contract. So it's going to be, we see guys come back from holdouts and they get off to slow starts. Bosa has a history of getting banged up a little bit and missing time. So, I'm checking out there. I'm going to go defensive end on an up-and-coming defense team that's really turned their fortunes around the last 18 months or so. And as much as it hurts me to pick a Michigan man, I'm going with Aiden Hutchinson.
Ooh, he's pretty far down the board. Got him at plus 2,500 there. So definitely an interesting one. Yeah, but it is a much better defense than it was before. And it's an exciting team. It's a team that people are talking about quite a bit. So I could see it. I did go with Max Crosby as I spoiled it already. He's looks like roughly 1,600 plus 1,600 odds to win Defensive Player of the Year. I'm Heavy T said 2,500. I need to go to whatever site that is because that's way better odds. But I just think the amount of sack opportunities that he's going to have is just going to be unreal. And I get it. It is tough to pick a guy on a bad team. But at the end of the day, these awards are supposed to be the most valuable player to their team. And I don't think that there's a more valuable player to a defense than Max Crosby. Now, you could argue Aaron Donald and TJ Watt and all of that too, but that entire defense goes as Max Crosby goes because there's nobody else there. So, in my opinion, I think he's got a good shot to win it, but I could see your argument of him losing a little bit simply because the team plays so poorly. Top odds right now are Micah Parsons and a guy that I thought about going with, but I didn't want to take 2 homer picks and Myles Garrett as well. All right, Dennis. Well, let's take another break here. And when we come back, now we're going to be talking some bold predictions, not awards predictions, some bold predictions. But before I do, I got to make sure I tell you guys about the Fantasy Alarm All-Pro subscription. You can get a 7-day free trial of Fantasy Alarm's All-Pro subscription and get the Fantasy Football Draft Guide plus the cheat sheet absolutely free. Go to fantasyalarm.com/draft. That's fantasyalarm.com/draft. We will be back in a moment with some bold predictions for 2023.
What can we expect from you out there on the track tonight?
Listen, I have a wife, 2 kids. I have, full-time jobs. I'm never nervous. I don't even know what that word means. Can you explain what nervous means? No. I'm ready to have fun. I've never done anything like this before. I got asked to be a part of this. This is fascinating. Like, it's so cool to just look around and see what goes on here. So I'm just excited to get out on the horse. And you want trash talk? Is that what you're asking me for? No trash talk. I hope everyone does well.
All right. Everyone's going to do well, but it has to be a winner. So give me your trifecta. Who's going to come in first, second, and third? Heat.
I will go Maria 1, me 2, Willie 3, Moose goes 4th.
Well, it's very simple. I won this event last year. I won my heat, and so the defending champ has to be the favorite. Now, that makes me a little nervous just because I feel like it's hard to repeat. There's a little pressure when you're the favorite, but that being said, I'm still optimistic.
So your heat, it's you,
yes.
Moose and Keith from Better Sports Network, and Willie Colon.
I think Keith might be my stiffest competition, and I asked for this because I actually recruited Keith, if you didn't know. So Keith, if you win, you're welcome.
Malusis is very good. I mean, he knows what he's doing, but I'm going to go with Maria.
Keith is waving to the crowd. He must pay attention because they're off. It's Mark Malusis going for the lead. Maria Marino on the outside, and now Keith Irizarry on the outside with speed, and they're 3 wide into the first turn. Woo! Mark Malusis is locked in for his life. 138 and 2. They're into the stretch. Sportscasters Derby 2. And still in front, Keith Irizarry. And now Mark Malusis is trying to squeeze on through.
Come on! Back! Come on! Let's go! Come on, dig it! Yeah!
Keith Irizarry. Keith, you did it all the way, wire to wire, over Mark Malusis.
Awesome! That was so cool.
The champ is here. Keith, what was it like being out there? Adrenaline rush. You were doing the Instagram live, so there was no panic. You looked cool, calm, collected the whole time, and you won it.
I felt really comfortable. I did. Like, I know you were joking with me before. Are you nervous? Are you whatever? What are you? David, the driver, was awesome. He's like, we're gonna win this. I said, all right, let's win this. And he said, let's go. Yeah, I just felt really comfortable. I did. It was fun. We're in the lead. I got Maria Marino on the right side of me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, she's gonna beat us, right? And then out of nowhere, you see Moose coming up this way, and we feel him breathing down our neck. And I'm like,
Moose
no,
on the loose.
Moose.
Watch out.
Moose was definitely on the loose, and we just got Moose by a neck, a nose, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, but again, all of this for a great cause, and it was absolutely awesome to do this. It was cool.
All right, Keith, congratulations. And no matter what, you could always hold this over Moose's head.
Yeah!
Oh, we are back. It is a Wednesday night, not a Thursday. I know you might be a little bit confused, but it is a Wednesday night. It is Dynasty Nerds on Better Sports Network. I am your host, Garret Price. I'm still here with my main man, culture coach, Dennis Bennett. Dennis, are you ready for some bold predictions for the 2023 season?
So if I just make them up, is that okay?
That's bold enough for me. I mean, that sounds real bold. To me, the bolder, the better. So, Dennis, I'll let you begin. Give me your first bold prediction for 2023.
So, I went through as I was thinking about bold predictions. I looked at my redraft rankings. We're just wrapping up our redraft rankings on the Fantasy Football Roundtable show. Mm-hmm. We got wide receivers 25 through 1 on Friday. And so go out to your favorite podcast platform, find the Fantasy Football Roundtable. You can hear all my rankings. And I was kind of comparing them to the Fantasy Pros ADP to look to see, like, all right, well, what would, how do my rankings look versus the ADP there, and what's going to be bold? And I got to be honest, it was surprisingly disappointing, my rankings versus the ADP. The one that stood out to me the most was Juwan Johnson at tight end 12.
Okay.
He's coming off the board at tight end 19. And, the Saints, new quarterback in Derek Carr, added Jamal Williams, touchdown machine. Alvin Kamara suspended three games. Chris Olave exploding onto the scene last year as just a dominant wide receiver. Michael Thomas is, quote, air quotes, back. And so, Rashid Shaheed, deep threat, you're one of everybody's favorite best ball late round plays because he just makes those shot plays. But man, Juwan Johnson had like 8 touchdowns on like 50 catches last year.
Yeah.
And he's not the inline tight end. That's Foster Moreau. And if Michael Thomas gets banged up, or maybe when I should say, maybe, I don't know if he's putting his lucky Buckeye in his shoe and that's what's messing up his foot.
That could be the problem.
Instead of in his pocket. I feel like Juwan Johnson, he's the pass catching tight end. We've seen, that offense is a derivative of Sean Payton's offense. And we've seen those tweener tight end guys like, Marcus Colston, and then Michael Thomas come in, ran a slow 40 time. He's 6'3". He's a bigger wide receiver. That type of player fits in. And that tier of tight ends is just so broad from like tight end 8 to tight end 20. And as I look at it more and more, I'm like, well, Juwan Johnson put up 8 touchdowns last year on 50 catches ish catches. He's gonna duplicate that at least. And so I'm going with Juwan Johnson. I feel like at tight end 12, he's going to squeak into the back end of the tight end ones. Probably a 60 to 70 catch guy. If Michael Thomas gets hurt, he could have a Travis Kelce type of season.
Mm-hmm.
Travis Light, probably not quite Travis Kelce.
Sure.
He can catch 80 passes. I don't think Jimmy Graham is a real threat to what he does. Graham is, he's there for posterity's sake. He looked great in preseason. Whatever. He's 62 years old. But probably my first hot take is Juwan Johnson, tight end 12.
I don't hate that. And I think Matt O'Hara actually, now the show, unfortunately, nobody got to hear the live show, and we kind of redid it today, but Matt wasn't able to make the show, but I think he had him at 10. So he's with you on that. He's a big fan of Juwan Johnson. And look, if you're going to take a tight end in that range, you might as well go for guys that you can draft later and you can get a potential ceiling out of. And he falls in line with that. That's part of the reason I like Cole Kmet so much. You can get him later and there's a ceiling, So if you're going to take a tight end that is not named Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, TJ Hawkinson, Darren Watt, like those main guys, you might as well wait, because you're right. You could find a diamond in the rough just as easily at pick 19 as you could at pick 8, where you had to pay for it. All right. I am, my redraft rankings, I had Tua as my number 8 overall quarterback. I just talked about how I think he is a sneaky good bet for odds on winning the MVP. And if I think he is a sneaky good odds for winning MVP, that means he probably put up some freaking good numbers. So my hot take is Tua is a top 3 fantasy football quarterback in 2023. Last year, Joe Burrow finished as the quarterback 4, and Joe Burrow doesn't run a lot either. He only had 257 rushing yards. So it's not like he's running a bunch, just like Tua won't run a bunch. But it was because of his arm. He put up 4,475 yards and 35 touchdowns. I think Tua can match and maybe even exceed those numbers this season. So I am all in on Tua, and I think he could be a top 3 fantasy football quarterback this coming year. Dennis, is that a little too bold, or what do you think?
I mean, the name of the game is bold predictions.
It's true.
And it's feasible. The biggest thing for me would be that somebody else has to step up in that offense. We know it's not going to be a tight end.
Right.
We don't know which running back is going to be healthy. I think Jeff Wilson and Raheem Mostert, they fit the offense. They know the offense from their San Francisco days. And, Devin A-Chain has flashed. But I think somebody has to kind of step up as a legitimate number 3 receiver there. And, I don't know who that's going to be. But I think I love it. I think it's great.
We're getting bold. We're getting spicy. Let's keep that spice going, Dennis. Who you got for your next bold prediction?
Man, with you going with QB3 and stuff, I feel like my predictions are very vanilla. So,
it's a lukewarm take.
I've got Javonte Williams, who's coming off the board at RB28 right now, ADP, or excuse me, RB. Oh, yeah, his ADP is RB28. I've got him going at RB16. So,
see, I'm already spicier than you, Dennis. I had him at 12.
And I don't think it's out of the question.
Yeah.
But Javonte, so Kamara was RB16 last year, and Kamara had 900 yards and 57 receptions for just under 500 yards, total of 4 touchdowns. I think that's, I'm probably selling him short at RB16. he looks like he's going to be good to go for the beginning of the season. You know, we know what Samaje Perine is. He's a Jag. He's the Jag of the Jags, and he's going to get some opportunity. But this is a Javonte Williams show, and you know the only reason Perine's going to get some opportunity is because coaches now feel like they've got to give a second running back,
Sure,
10 to 12 touches or whatnot. But no, I've got Javonte. I feel like he's been going off the board so late that he's been such a steal in drafts. And I'm not one to throw around the term league winner very often. But if you're getting Javonte at RB, 25 to 28, to me, that feels like that feels like somebody you're going to stick in your lineup and start every dang day and not worry about it. He's going to be productive. He's going to play on third downs. He's getting plenty of carries. He's going to get goal line work. Dang, I should probably move him up.
Yeah, that's what I like to hear, Dennis. Yeah, for not even a bold take, just for my normal rankings, I put him as my running back 12. And, part of it is like how much of a freak he was being able to come back from that injury. But the other part of it is I think they're going to use him a lot in the receiving game. He averaged 7 targets per game over the 3 games that he started and finished last year. So with Russell Wilson's looking for him. And Russell Wilson now falls in line with the Phillip Rivers, the Ben Roethlisbergers, the Tom Bradys, these old quarterbacks that are just going to keep checking the ball down. They're not going to take off and run like Richardson and Fields and those guys will. As they get older, they don't run as much, and they're going to check it down more often. Javonte is going to be a huge beneficiary of that, especially because of how good their division is. They might be down quite a bit again this year. So they're going to be having to throw the ball later in games and check the ball down. In the first preseason game, we only played 1 freaking quarter. 5 targets. 5 targets in 1 quarter. Like unreal passing volume there. So if that is even a glimpse into what is possible for Javonte Williams, you're right. League winning upside in 2024 or 2023, either year. Also 2024, he has league winning upside that year as well. All right, let's get to my next bold prediction. Is it bold to say Deontay Johnson will score more touchdowns last year or this year than last year? Is that bold?
Depends on how many more you're saying.
All right. Well, maybe I won't go with quite that exactly, but instead, I think Deontay Johnson finishes as a top 15 wide receiver this year. On targets last year, Deontay Johnson was actually 7th among wide receivers in targets last year. And I get it. Everyone wants to talk about George Pickens. I still think George Pickens, even though he's going to make some spectacular plays, is not the guy that's going to be leading in targets because of the type of quarterback that Kenny Pickett is and the type of player that Deontay Johnson is. He's going to be in a role to see targets more frequently. So if you're playing in PPR leagues, I think he is absolutely the wide receiver to own on this team. And obviously, we're going to see some positive regression at the touchdown or in the touchdown department. He finished as wide receiver 28 last year with no touchdowns. I think he can easily move up 12 to 13 spots. And if he just gets a few touchdowns this year, because total points, he wasn't that far behind a lot of the guys that are in that range. If he just gets 5-6 touchdowns, he's averaged 6.5 a year every year. But the other thing is, I think this offense is going to be a better offense than what we've seen in the past from the Pittsburgh Steelers. Kenny Pickett's in his second year. It's the same offense. I think Deontay Johnson, my bold prediction is Deontay Johnson is a top 15 wide receiver in 2023.
Yeah, his ADP right now is crazy. He's like wide receiver 36. And I'm just like, man, I've got him at 19 and I feel like I'm selling him short. But I haven't looked at my underdog shares in a while. But, man, I've got so much more Deontay Johnson than I do George Pickens.
Me too.
Pickens is going off at like wide receiver 24 or 26. And I'm like, Pickens is 2023 Gabe Davis is what he is.
Yeah.
He's gonna have a couple games where you're like, oh my
Monster.
God, I got to start this guy, and then you're gonna have about 8, not goose eggs, but 8 games where he just leaves you wanting, anything. 6 points, 8 points. Give me something. It's gonna be it's just crazy. But man, I love Deontay Johnson this year. He's a guy that I just can't seem to get enough of. I'm gonna go dip into the quarterback pool. I love me some grape Kool-Aid. And I'm gonna go with Lamar Jackson. I don't think he's gonna breach that MVP season, 36 touchdowns, but I think he's gonna push for 30 touchdown passes. I like they've Mark Andrews, love, and so does Lamar.
Yeah.
I think Dobbins is going to get, a little more work, and Justice Hill also in the passing game. I don't think it's going to be an offense that ever features a running back as a receiver. But when I start to look at their wide receiver group, it's the ghost of Odell Beckham, and I like what Beckham brings to this team. I hope he can stay healthy and deliver. I think Rashad Bateman, he makes me a little nervous. He just can't seem to shake the foot issues and that plantar fascia that he's having lots of trouble with. Zay Flowers looks good. They've got players. It's going to be awful for fantasy from the wide receiver group because you just don't know who it's going to be. But it's going to be good enough on a week-to-week basis that I think Lamar is going to put up 30 touchdowns.
Yeah, that would be big to get him back into that realm. You're right, 36 is his high watermark, but if he can get back into that range, we're talking easily top 5 and maybe even top 3 quarterback, knowing the rushing yardage that he's going to get. And we might see a small decrease in rushing yardage from what we've seen out of him in the past. Just an effort to try to keep him healthy, because Dennis, we know that's been the biggest issue. That's part of the reason it took so long to sign him, was just going back and forth and trying to figure out his value and the worries around him being able to stay healthy, not staying healthy. That's always been the biggest issue, the biggest problem with Lamar. So I could see a world where they just lower that a little bit, lower that threshold of yards that he would be able to get. I think that's a good call. All right, let's move to the running back position for me. And there's a few different ones that I wanted to go with, but I tried to figure out how to get a Tyjae Spears one in here, because I love to do bold predictions for guys that I love, but I couldn't get one in because at the end of the day, it's Derrick Henry's team. Best case scenario, Spears is, used on third downs and maybe to spell him once or twice a game, but we're talking about not a lot of work. Maybe what we used to see out of Tony Pollard when Zeke was the main guy. I think it's going to be something like that. Now, if there was injury, that would be a little bit different, and all of a sudden I would be making all kinds of Spears bold predictions. But unfortunately, it does not look like that's going to be the case. So I've been on the positive for most of this. I'm gonna do a negative one here. I think Kenneth Walker is not a top 16 running back in 2023. Now, I don't think that's crazy spicy because his ADP has moved down a little bit, but I am worried about the valuable touches, the passing work, and the stuff around the goal line. So let's say 18, because I wrote down 16, but I realized that's not halfway through. So outside of the top 18 running backs in 2023. What do you think, Dennis?
I've got him as RB21.
Okay, so maybe this isn't that spicy.
So he's got to get over trying to bounce everything to the outside. Pete Carroll loves him some DJ Dallas.
Yeah, he does.
They spent good draft capital on Zach Charbonnet and great draft capital on JSN to go with Tyler Lockett who still has plenty left in the tank, and DK Metcalf. So it's going to be a good offense. I just think that if Charbonnet, like if they do the whole, oh, well, we're going to put Charbonnet in on the third series and he looks great, Pete will keep him in. And Walker has the opportunity. He has an opportunity to be the guy, but it just feels like because he isn't as great in the passing game and he's not quite as big as Charbonnet, I think for his size, I think he's probably a little more powerful than Charbonnet.
Mm-hmm.
But Charbonnet is just a significantly larger back.
Right.
And
yeah, so maybe this wasn't as hot as I thought because I thought his ADP was a little bit higher. Right now, he's right around 16. So I only have him 2 spots below than what it would be. So I guess this was my most lukewarm hot take of all of the hot takes I had today.
Don't you hate it when you do your show notes in the afternoon and they update the stuff in the
Dang it.
before the show?
Jerks. All right, Dennis, what do you got next for me, my man?
I'm dipping back into the tight end.
All right.
And this is going to come off. This is going to feel like a negative to you.
Okay.
I think that Sam Laporta outscores Dalton Kincaid.
Woo! I could see that. I could see that happening. I do think Sam Laporta is going to get a lot of work this year. And I'm just not 100% sure what the volume is going to be for Kincaid, but I'll let you make your case, but I can understand that.
A lot of it comes down to I'm not as high on Kincaid. I've talked all summer, and I'm not a guy that tends to invest heavily, like at least for the last couple of years. I've been working off this thesis of let tight ends show themselves and then go get those that have showed themselves, in part because the top end is so heavy. I acknowledge they're never cheaper than in a rookie draft, but because so many of them don't pan out, they're classic roster cloggers. And do I think that Kincaid or Laporta is going to be a roster clogger? No, I don't. I just think in 2023, Laporta is going to be higher in the pecking order than Dalton Kincaid. I think the Lions are going to throw the ball plenty. I think they have a really nice balanced offense. Laporta brings good size to the red zone. Gabe Davis is a big wide receiver. Stephon Diggs isn't tiny. Dalton Schultz is there. Not Dalton Schultz. What is his name?
Dawson Knox.
Dawson Knox is there, and he's going to be on the field. I think Knox outsnaps Kincaid. I don't think he out-targets him, but I think he outsnaps him. And so I've got Laporta at 17 and Kincaid at 19.
Okay. Yeah, I could see that. I think there is absolutely a world where Laporta gets a little bit more volume because of that, more fantasy points. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. Tight end is so dependent on situation, on quarterback, on like all of that. Tight end is very, very dependent on that. So I don't think that's crazy. I think that's a very real possibility. All right. My next bold prediction is that Geno Smith reverts back to who he really was, and the carriage turns back into a pumpkin, and we all lose out on all that value for Geno Smith. So everything went about as well as it could have gone for Geno Smith last year. And they have added Jackson Smith and Jigba for him. They added another running back. Like, they've added all of these things. But at the end of the day, you have to win a lot of games. And I just don't know how many games the Seattle football team is going to win this year. I think the Rams will be not back, but better than they were before. And so I think those easy layup wins are not going to be there for that team. Now, the Cardinals are pretty terrible. those are going to be pretty easy ones for that football team. But then they got to go against the Niners as well, and I don't think that they're going to be able to take down the Niners at all. And so I think he just once again looks like an average quarterback that is a borderline backup guy. I think everything went about as well as it could have last year, and I think he turns back into a pumpkin. And I feel mean. It feels like a mean one. But that's the bold prediction for me. What do you think, Dennis?
I can totally see it. I've got him at QB 15 right now. And part of that is just me believing in Metcalf and Lockett and JSN. Sure. But I think the concern is that if he does start to struggle a little bit, Pete Carroll is not opposed to running the ball 45 times.
Yeah.
That's part of the challenge I have when I'm like looking at the Browns. At his core, Stefanski is a run the ball coach. And I think that bodes well for Nick Chubb. And right now I've got Watson at 9, but I could see it going completely the other way. I think right now, like I said, I've got him at 15, but if he finishes outside the top 20, I don't think I would be surprised, because it is, he's been the same guy for a long time.
Yep.
And as much as I like the story, he could easily just fade away.
Yeah. And I feel bad doing this kind of stuff because I don't want it to seem like I'm not rooting for the guy. Like, awesome redemption story, got a contract, but it just feels like, man, was it a little too soon to give him a decent contract? Are we really sure that this is who he is? I don't know. We'll see. All right, Dennis, you're up, my man.
I mean, is it a hot take to say that Mike Evans gets 1,000 yards?
I
am not into that Tampa offense, but man, I think they're gonna. I feel like it's a team that's saying, "Look, we're gonna get that for you." But
right,
after the year that Godwin had last year, he's definitely the volume guy. I don't trust Baker. I don't trust Kyle Trask. I keep waiting for him to sign Carson Wentz. It's it's not a hot take, but
it's not. But I get what you're saying.
I just wanted to get it on tape.
All right.
I've got Keenan Allen finishing as a top 15 wide receiver.
Ooh, I like that one.
We can see the sunset on Keenan Allen's career, and he still gets good volume. It's going to be a high volume passing offense. There are a lot of people catching passes there, like 6 people catching passes if you include Johnston. I mean, Everett's catching a lot of passes. Eckler's catching a lot of passes. Palmer's catching a lot of passes. Mike Williams. So they've got a lot but they're gonna. It wouldn't surprise me if the Chargers lead the league in pass attempts this year.
Yeah, no, I think they're going to throw a lot. It's going to be a pretty competitive division, and he's finished up there a lot. Like, he's finished up there quite a bit right now. Roughly quarterback, wide receiver 19 off the board. So that would be a pretty good jump for him to hop back into the top 12. And that would be great for, his fantasy prospects this year. So I'm rooting for it. I have him a couple places on some win now teams. So I'd love to see him perform like a wide receiver 1 this year. All right. I have 3 left, and they're my 3, what I believe to be my most bold, because I've gotten a little lukewarm. My 3 most bold hot takes left. So don't go anywhere. But we are going to go to break. And when we come back, we will do my 3 hottest takes, and then whatever ones Dennis has left. I don't know if you saved your hottest or you did your hot ones early, but we'll see. But I do need to make sure I tell you once again about our friends over at Fantasy Alarm and their all-pro subscription. Look, everything is better when there's a free trial included. I wish like dinner had a free trial included, because that would be great. I would just eat free dinner all the time. And then I would just say, I didn't really like it, and then just try a different one. but it doesn't work that way. But you can get a free trial of the All-Pro subscription to Fantasy Alarm. When you do that, you get the fantasy football draft guide and cheat sheet absolutely free. Go to fantasyalarm.com/draft. That's fantasyalarm.com/draft. We will be back when we do the 3 hottest takes I got.
I feel like this is a quietly contentious point in Dynasty fantasy football, what it means to actually be rebuilding. Some people say you should never truly be rebuilding. How do you view the rebuilding versus competing dichotomy in Dynasty?
So I will be the first person to acknowledge that my preferred format of fantasy football is just redraft. The years that I have played Dynasty, it has been, I've drafted a win now team because I've seen people that have just gotten into the cycle of rebuilding and thus they just don't make any progress. So if you're rebuilding for the 5th year in a row, I just, I don't know exactly how you get out of it, but yeah, it's definitely something that can happen. And a lot of people, especially when we come out of the NFL draft, everyone's just instantly shipping off, draft picks and everything. So, I mean, it's definitely something that can happen.
Joey, do you feel similarly to it? Do you feel like you see people getting stuck in the rebuilding loop?
I mean, I would say people that try to rebuild in the beginning of seasons, of their fantasy seasons, I see them get stuck in that rut. I would really try to only ever rebuild if I knew I was going to miss the playoffs. Like, I'm always trying to play to win, even if it's maybe I don't know.
I think my big thing is the word rebuild is a much shorter time frame than I think most people say it should be. Like, they look at rebuild as like 3 years out competing. Rebuild, you're looking to compete next season. You know what I mean? Like, if you're doing it now, you're looking to revamp, and maybe there's a one season where you ship it off, but that very next season you should be competing. If you're doing it like that, I'm cool with it, but you gotta have a plan, not just keep getting the young players, keep getting the draft picks. Otherwise, you end up like Tim. Maybe not like Tim who gets a bye, but you make the playoffs, you're in that like 4 to 6 range every year, just hovering in the middle. Nothing ever gets better, nothing ever gets worse.
I think I play like you in Dynasty, Simon. I play in 3-year windows.
100%. That's my go-to. And with the rate at which Dynasty leagues turn over, you should really only ever play in a 3-year window.
Giddy up, boys and girls. We're back, Dynasty Nerds. Garret Price, Dennis Bennett, with you for the last half hour. Everything that we're doing is getting you ready for the 2023 season. We're just a little over a week away. So close. And here come our hottest take, or at least mine. I don't know if Dennis saved his hot ones for the end or had them in the beginning. But hottest takes, best for last. I will go with my first one, maybe my most bold. You can tell me which one of these 3 is my most bold. All right? This one's really bold. You ready?
Ready.
Bijan Robinson breaks Eric Dickerson's record of 1,808 rushing yards.
I think that's bold. I think that's very, very bold. I think he could do it. I think it's well within the range of outcomes for him. I just don't think he'll get the opportunities to do it.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's a tough record to break because running backs don't get 350 carries a year as much as
he would have to, like, if you had said 2,000 scrimmage yards, I'd have been like, oh yeah. If you had said 2,200 scrimmage yards, I'd still been like, oh yeah, because I could see him catching 60, 70 passes, and rushing for 12 or 1,300 yards, and catching 700 or 800 yards worth of getting 700 or 800 yards worth of receiving yards. But breaking 1,800 yards, I guess the thing you have going for it is a 17-game season now.
You have an extra game,
so that helps. You've got hospital ball Heineke and what seems to have been a relatively inaccurate Desmond Ridder here in preseason. So I could see Arthur Smith turtling up and going very, very run heavy.
Look,
I can see it happening. I have concerns that, he knows that Tyler Algier can put up 1,000 yards, and so it feels to me like he's going to look at Bijan and say, is it really? I've got this other guy that can take some of this pounding too.
Yeah, but the last guy to get 2,000 rushing yards, he was the offensive coordinator for that guy.
Right.
So if there's somebody that would let it happen, it would probably be my man Arthur Smith. Heavy T, a big Atlanta Falcons fan, he said he would die and go to heaven if this happened. So hopefully my bold take does not come true, because I need you to keep being a fantastic producer for me there, Heavy T. So hopefully it does not come true.
I think you could still produce remotely from heaven.
Yeah, that's true. Remote work. Yeah, that would work. All right, Dennis, that was a pretty bold one. What do you got for me?
So I'm going to put on my scarlet and gray blinders again. And, maybe I'm smoking your hat or something. I think Zeke Elliott gets 15 touchdowns rushing.
15 rushing touchdowns from Zeke?
Ramondre is still the lead back there. Zeke is going to be, he's not going to get he's not going to average 4 yards a carry this year. He's going to be the hammer. He's going to be the guy that pounds the ball in when they get close, because he does all the fundamental right things that Bill Belichick likes. He's younger than Corey Dillon when Corey Dillon went to New England and had all those 3 seasons. Ramondre's still going to have a good year, but Ramondre was what, RB7 last year?
Yeah, he was fantastic.
With 4 rushing touchdowns. Ramondre's going to catch a bunch of passes. He's going to rush for over 1,000 yards. Zeke is going to be the touchdown hammer at 15.
I just don't know that they even score that many touchdowns, let alone them all going to Zeke. That is flaming hot Cheetos. That's a really bold
I'm in the midst. These last few, I have to disassociate them with my rankings.
You have to.
Here's something that could happen that I'm going to go on record and say it's going to happen. It doesn't match where I've got things ranked.
No, because you would never rank them where you would do a hot take. Yeah, like last year, one of my ones that actually hit was Ramondre Stevenson outscores Damian Harris and is a running back 1. And that was like one of my boldest ones, and it hit, but I had plenty that completely flamed out and made me look like an idiot. So that is absolutely a possibility. But man, that's a bold one, Dennis. I'm proud of you. That was real bold. All right. My next one. Let's ask Heavy T so far, and let's ask those listening. What's been the boldest take so far? Bijan 1,800, breaking the 1,808 rushing yards, or Zeke Elliott with 15 touchdowns this year? Tough part is he's not even going to be the lead back.
12 just sounded so easy for him.
That would be pretty impressive. Okay. All right. My next hot take. Heavy T said Zeke would literally be insane. All right. So I think you've won the hottest take award so far. All right. My next one here is Christian Watson has a breakout year and finishes as a wide receiver 1. Dennis, what do you think about
Christian Watson, man, I am here for it.
All right.
I think that he is he's in a position. He does what no other receiver on that team does. He's like MVS with better hands. I don't know how much better yet, because we saw last year.
Sure.
But he's big, he's fast, he's a good route runner, if not a great route runner. He's still a good route runner. This team is set up like it's going to be bonkers if Jordan Love is 85% of Aaron Rodgers in this team, because all of their top receivers and tight ends are year 1 or 2 guys. And they'll be able to, they signed Love to an extension for a year. They added an extra year so they could figure out, all right, we think this guy knows how to play, but can he really? And so they added an extra year to his contract. But I could totally see that happening. I think I've got a lot more Romeo Doubs than I do Christian Watson.
Sure.
But I could totally. Watson is the explosion. He just brings something to the team that nobody else does.
And that's the thing. With a guy like Christian Watson, we saw Christian Kirk become a wide receiver 1 last year. So guys come out and do it out of nowhere all the time. And it's out of necessity because there's not a lot of other options on the team. So somebody's got to get the targets. Christian Kirk got him last year. If Christian Watson gets a good target load, most of his targets are going to be downfield because he's a guy that is stretching the field vertically. So if that were to happen, and look, remember that 5-game stretch last year where he just went bonkers and just scored touchdowns left and right? If he has a full season, not of that, nobody expects him to do that all season long. But if he has a full season of consistent play where he's getting 4-5 receptions for 50, 60 yards, and then he has a stretch like that as well, now you're in wide receiver 1 range. So that's how I justify it in my mind. I know it's a hot one. I know it's probably unlikely, but that is a hot take. And by the way, for those that listen to the Dynasty Nerd Show, I will have different hot takes for the Dynasty Nerd Show podcasts than I do for the BSN. So these will not be the same recycled ones. Maybe some of the players might be a little bit similar, but overall, I will have different predictions for the Bold Prediction Show on the Dynasty Nerds podcast. All right, Dennis, I've put 2 flaming hot Cheetos out there. What do you got for me?
All right. So, last year, admittedly, a subpar wide receiver class.
Sure.
And awesomely, teams didn't overdraft him.
Right.
They, in my eyes, underdrafted a guy. Howell was my guy in the draft last year. I think Sam Howell produces 2 top 15 top 20. I'm going to say top 20.
Okay.
I think Howell produces 2 top 20 wide receivers this year.
I think that's a possibility. Now, 20 is a little less hot than 15.
15, yeah. But I feel like McLaurin's going to be like 14 and Dotson will be like 17. So
the biggest thing will be, is McLaurin healthy? That's the biggest thing that worries me right now. Like, because if McLaurin is healthy, we know he has the talent to get up there. And I love Jahan Dotson as much as the next guy. So I'm with you on that part of it. But yeah, that's a big thing.
We'll call it 2 top 17 wide receivers.
There we go. 17.5 or better. We'll take the over on those 2 guys. What gives you that confidence in? Is it more Sam Howell? Is it more those receivers? Is it some sort of a combination?
It's definitely a combination. McLaurin has consistently produced very good numbers with shit at the quarterback position. Now, that's not to say that Howell is like a difference maker. Jahan Dotson has flashed, like he has a nose for the end zone. He's a playmaker. He just gets it done. For me, Sam Howell has that it kind of thing. It's like he should have came out a year earlier, probably, because he literally lost his top 2 wide receivers and top 2 running backs.
Right.
And then North Carolina just wasn't a great team. And I don't know how many offensive linemen he lost. But going back for that extra year, maybe he had to because he wasn't eligible. But then he put up, over 800 yards rushing that year in college. And he's not fast. He's like, I think he timed at 4.8.
Yeah.
So he's
Which
not
is fine,
fast.
but he's not blazing.
Right. He's faster than us, but
yeah.
but he's a smart. When he runs, he's looking to throw. He's big enough that he can take a hit. I don't think he's, he isn't looking to hit people when he's running, but he gets enough yardage to he keeps plays alive.
He's not a
good
ragdoll.
arm, throws a nice deep ball. He's a heady quarterback. I think he's just one of those guys that gets it done and isn't always pretty. He'll probably never be a top 10 fantasy quarterback, but I could see him bouncing back and forth, between QB 18 and QB 12, and we saw Teddy Bridgewater put 3 top 25 receivers in a season where he finished as like QB 18 or something.
Right.
So it isn't a huge stretch to think that he could be decently productive and have 2 in the top 17.
Yeah. No, I don't hate it. I don't hate it. And I like Sam Howell. I like both of those receivers. And I do think that Jahan Dotson is one of the most underrated guys. He was overlooked in last year's amazing wide receiver class. He's still being drafted way below a lot of those guys, even though he's just as talented and I think has a chance to put up some huge numbers. So, yeah, I'm absolutely with you on that. All right, my last hot take, bold prediction, whatever we're calling it, it has to do with your team, Dennis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which team? Which one of my teams?
The Lions. The Motor City Kitties. All right. I have Amon-Ra St. Brown finishes as the wide receiver 1 overall in 2023. It's bold, Dennis. How bold?
How does he get there? Like, what's his path?
All right, so here's how he gets there. First of all, he was wide receiver 7 last year. In that, he also missed a game and cut a couple other games short due to injury. So things would look a lot better had that not happened. 2, I think this offense is going to be even better than it was the year before. 3, Jamison Williams is gone the first 6 games. So I think he's going to go absolutely nuclear the first few weeks. Now, look, am I ranking him as the wide receiver 1 overall? No. But this is it's a hot take. I can't come in here with this lukewarm stuff and say that he's going to finish as wide receiver 5. He finished as wide receiver 7 last year. So I got to go bold. I got to go hot. Amon-Ra St. Brown as the number 1 overall receiver. Dennis, you follow this team more closely than I do. Is it even a possibility?
It is. Now, the challenge is that
MVT says I'm insane.
It is. He had 146 targets last year and a crazy 72.6% catch rate. So when you hear those 2 things, you think, oh, that's great. But what it is an 11-yard per reception. So it's definitely, he's got to get outside, and he's been stomping the table for, play me outside. I'm not just a slot guy.
Right.
So he'll have to produce better yardage when he is out there. And, can he do it? He had 6 touchdowns. That's Deontay Johnson territory.
Yeah.
I think to get there, he's going to have to double the touchdown number at least.
Yeah, I think he's got to at least get to double digits, and we've got to see the reception numbers get in like the 120 range, and then we've got to see the yardage. He's got to be a little more efficient with those yards. So we need him to get into like the 1,400 to low 1,500s range.
Yeah, I would think he's going to have to get close to 1,600 or more. He's going to have to be pushing Tyreek Hill, Justin Jefferson yardage numbers to finish up there, and double-digit touchdowns.
So just for reference, Justin Jefferson last year, the wide receiver 1, He only had 8 touchdowns, so he didn't have ridiculous touchdown numbers, but he had 1,800 yards receiving. So massive,
How many passes did he catch?
128. So 128 receptions. So Amon-Ra's got to get to at least 120.
So that's 20 more points just on receptions.
Right. He's got to get to at least 120. And remember, he missed 3 games, though. Well, he only formally missed 1 game, but he cut 2 other games short because of injury. So there were 3 games that were affected by injury. Had he played all those games, those reception totals might not be that far off if he gets all 3 of those full games. So he goes, he's got to get over 120. He's got to get over 1,500, and he's got to get double digits to have a chance at it. A chance. I think it's in the realm of possibility, though. I really do.
It could happen, to quote my dear friend Judy Tenuta.
Look, I it's got to be bold. I can't come in here and say it's my 3, boldest takes, and they're in here with this like lukewarm, weak stuff. But I think we saw a 5.8 point game and a 1.4. Those were games that he was banged up, injured, trying to come back. And even the game he left, he had 13.3. So he was playing well, but didn't get to finish that game. So we clean up a couple of those games where he's banged up, and those become double-digit games as opposed to single digits. We're looking pretty darn good.
All right. My last one.
Let's lay it on thick, Dennis.
So I think.
Oh, you've got the conspiracy theory hands even going.
I think after everything that's happened off the field and all of the gambling stuff going on in the NFL, to throw it back in Roger Goodell's face and step up and say, this is ridiculous what's been happening. You're sending mixed messages about can't gamble. The league's involved with all of these gambling sites. I think Calvin Ridley finishes as a top 5 wide receiver.
Woo! I like it. I
love
like
Trevor
it.
Lawrence. I think that Ridley has looked so good this preseason. They've got other weapons so that they can't focus on him. I think this team takes a step in the second year with Doug Peterson. And Calvin Ridley, he is the wide receiver 1 there.
Yes.
He's going to put up the numbers.
Well, we saw Christian Kirk finish as wide receiver 12. So we know that Trevor Lawrence is capable, of getting a guy up there. I guess the big question is, what's his target share going to be like compared to Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram, Zay Jones? So you think he'll get enough workload? Because just for reference, last year, the wide receiver 5, so to get him in the top 5, he'd have to top, or be right around these numbers. So CeeDee Lamb was the wide receiver 5 last year. He had 107 receptions for 1,359 yards and 9 touchdowns. So you think he can beat or be right around those numbers?
Oh, yeah. Last year, so Christian Kirk is the number 1 last year, was the first read on 25% of Trevor Lawrence's dropbacks. Ridley steps into that and I think increases it. I'm looking for his market share. Because I think that I think Ridley gets a bigger market share than Christian Kirk had.
Okay.
So Christian Kirk had a 21% target share, and he was the first read on 25% of his targets. I think that Ridley, I like Christian Kirk. He's a number 2. I think Ridley is just going to outproduce. Zay Jones is the guy that's going to take the hit. I think Evan Ingram takes a hit, and they've got a solid running game, which is going to provide them some balance and take some of the pressure off the receivers. And despite the slow start to Trevor Lawrence's career, dude is a phenomenal quarterback, and I think Ridley pays off with a top 5 season.
It is definitely a possibility. It's just hard to know if he's going to get enough targets. That's the thing that really worries me. Christian Kirk with 133 last year. To get inside the top 5, he's going to have probably closer to 150 targets, but Christian Kirk is still there. And I think that's the part that is a little bit tricky. And I think that this year, even more so than last year, they're going to be up a lot in games because their division is so bad. I think they are the best team in their division. So they're not going to be playing from behind as much. So we might see a little more rushing volume with Tank Bigsby and Travis Etienne. But like I said, it had to be bold. We couldn't come in here with weak stuff. And I could see it.
Peterson comes from the Andy Reid school, and I don't think there's any, Mahomes regularly throws for 5,000 yards. And it's what Lawrence had 4,100 yards last year, only a 66% completion rate. You add, he threw 584 times. You add 75 attempts to that, increase that completion percentage, get that yardage up to 5,000. I can
5,000 for T-Law this year. That'd be big.
It would be.
That would be big. That would be pushing MVP territory. So awesome. Jaws said it's the not aliens, but aliens hands that you had going there. Awesome. Avatar says set in their ways, old guys. Number 1, rookie tight end haters. Let me tell you right now, Dalton Kincaid is the number 2 in targets in Buffalo. You don't trade up into the first round to get a pass catcher. Just throw him 50 balls. He's going to be in the slot. He'll be in tight end packages. Expect 80 to 100 targets. So Avatar's not feeling you on this, Dennis. He's not feeling you.
Well, you kids, I tell you.
Get off my lawn. No, Avatar and I are bonding over this. I like it. But that about wraps things up tonight. Dennis, you had a heavy workload tonight. You were with me the whole show. Thank you so much for being on, discussing all of this stuff right before the season. Remind the folks where they can find you and anything you want to promote real quick.
Well, you can catch me over at culture_coach on the X machine. That's where you can find me, Avatar. Come, let's chat. Fantasy Football Roundtable podcast.
Awesome. Well, I think our first Wednesday show was successful. Once again, Buckeye leaf, not weed. Remember that. Appreciate you guys hanging out with us.
Guy with a weed hat.
I know, right? Next week will be the day before kickoff eve. I'm Garret Price. You can follow me on Twitter or X at Dynasty Price. We'll see you next Wednesday.